Hello, my beautiful bookish people. In this video, I'm going to be doing the ideal bookshelf tag. I was originally tagged by the Booktube goddess. If you don't know anything about them, I have their channel linked down below. And I've also found the original creator, which I will also leave linked down in the description. So let's get into it. Question number 1. The first book you remember reading as a child. I have a few that I can remember being read to me, but the first one that I probably read that wasn't completely memorized, but probably was memorized, but also was probably me reading it, maybe, was The Shy Little Kitten, which is a Little Golden Books thing. I don't really know a whole lot about Little Golden Books other than they were what I had as a small wee tot. And this book is by Kathleen Scher, and apparently they're now available on ebook format. So I actually reread this kind of fairly recently, within the past year, just to see why I liked it so much as a kid. As an adult, I can wholeheartedly say that it was just because there was a kitty. Because as a story, it's kind of but it's a short story for kids and it's cute pictures and there was a kitty, and I still love all things cute, especially if there's a cat involved. Question number 2. A book you received as a gift. The one that I probably reference the most often would be this cookbook called Cooking Essentials, which is like a special edition for the Cooking Club of America, and it is written by Mary Berry and Marlena Spieler. Yes, that Mary Berry, as in the Great British Bake Off. And the reason I reference this a lot is because it has a lot of really good basics of what each thing means in a kitchen, how to do the techniques and stuff, what pots and pans are, how you'll need them, why you need them. Just really basic how to cook stuff and learn how to do that. And then eventually you get into guided recipes with step-by-step photo instructions. And then by the end of the book, you get a bunch of recipes. And I end up referencing this book a lot because there are some really good base recipes that I then change up a lot. I've also given this to my partner because when I'm too tired to cook anything and we want food and we have stuff in the fridge, I'm like, hey, go get this book because it's really easy to follow because pictures and really good written instructions. And then also I've gifted this book to a few other people too because of how good of a walkthrough it does, from really basic instruction to you being able to do stuff on your own. Question number 3. A book that was important to your teenage years. This book doesn't look like much. I've talked about it in a couple of other videos before, I think, but this is a book called Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if this is the complete work of Poe bound into one book, but it is the oldest book in my collection, and I did fall asleep reading this as a teenager quite frequently. That gives you an idea of what kind of teen I was. Question number 4. A book you can always go back to. I don't know how many tag videos this book is going to show up in, but it's The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. Actually, coming up pretty soon, I'm going to have a dedicated video to this book and the one that just unseated it as my all-time middle grade favorite. But this is a book that I read in middle grade that really made me fall in love with reading. And every time I read it, I get something new out of it because while the topics covered in the book are adult topics like, hey, here's how you shift your perspective and what things look like from different areas, and why numbers are important, and why words are important, and why neither are more important than each other, and just all sorts of shenanigans and puns, and just, I freaking love this book. And anytime I get really bad stuck in a reading slump and I need to get out of it, I will either pick up the physical or the audiobook copy, because it just gives me all of the warm, familiar feels and gives me something new every time I read it. Question number 5, a book that brings you the feeling of pride. I don't necessarily feel pride while I'm reading. It's just not something I really associate together, but I did work on a book. It's by no means perfect because editing is hard and I'm not a professional editor, but this book, Blood and Vinyl by Ignacio R. Limon, I have worked on, and I am very proud that I at least tried to do something. And actually, I really need to edit the other books for Iggy, and hopefully I'll get that done by the end of this week or next week. Question number 6, a book that gives you the feeling of wonder. And for that, I am going to go with Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I sat down with this book while I was kind of going into a reading slump, and I figured, oh, I'll just sit here and read for 10 minutes or get through 10 pages, just so that I keep reading and I keep myself in the habit of reading. I sat down and I blinked, and all of a sudden 50 pages were gone. I flew through this book because just every word is so important, and the world that is imagined is so creative, and how the magic works is so cool, and just the topics that are covered. I know that a lot of people on Booktube are spouting about this and like loving it, so I picked it up because a couple of my friends were like, have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? And I was like, no, let me get it. And I found a used copy for sale, and I picked it up, and I'm so very glad I did. I do not have enough good words to say about this book. Just everybody needs to pick it up. And this is the other book that I was talking about earlier that I need to film a dedicated video for. Question number 7, the book you've reread or love the most. And I'm going to go with a book I have reread the most, and that's going to go to Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. I cannot tell you how many times I've reread this book because I've had it literally ever since I can remember via audiobook and in physical books. I don't know where the physical books are anymore, but I re-bought a copy of the audiobooks because I used to have it as a book on tape, which was a gift from my grandmother, and now I have it as a digital copy, and I think I re-listen to these at least once a year, partially out of nostalgia, partially because I just really enjoy the whole feeling that that book gives me, because it's kind of nonsensical and yet somewhat wise in some of the sayings, and they're just short and sweet, and who doesn't love Winnie the Pooh? Question number 8, a book you want to have on your shelves forever. I'm gonna go with a few categories for this one. For children's, Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. For middle grade, we're gonna go with Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I literally cannot say enough good things about this book. For YA, I'm gonna go with Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, because I read this book so fast. The twists and turns that it take are phenomenal. I have so many good things to say about this book as well, and just, I cannot wait for the next book in this series to come out, and I can never see myself getting rid of this. And for adult, I am going to go with a tie in between the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin and the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. They're both very, very different, and I love them equally for what they do. If you're looking for a true SFF, meaning sci-fi and fantasy, like literally the biggest cross between the two that is true to SFF as a whole, that's going to be the Broken Earth trilogy. And if you're looking for magical realism that then turns into high fantasy, that's going to be the Farseer trilogy. And did I mention political intrigue and dragons? Because that's in these books. Question number 9, a book on your shelf you want everyone to read. And for this, I'm also going to go by categories because I have so many suggestions, some of which I have physical copies of, some of which I have digital copies of, and some of which I checked out of the library, and I'm waiting to collect them at some point into my shelves. For my first category, I'm going to go with memoir because I discovered last year that I kind of like picking up a memoir every now and again, which surprised me because I'm trying to branch out from just sci-fi and fantasy. This is one of my categories that I now consider that I like every now and again. And for this pick, I'm going to go with Officer Clemens by Francois S. Clemens. It is, if you grew up in the States and watched PBS, which is the public broadcasting channel, chances are you watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And Francois Clemens played Officer Clemens in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And it is his story of being a gay black man and how he got into national television and went about his life with his singing. And it's just really neat to see that story because he went from not being able to really be out and having to step away from the show because he was a gay man who wanted to go to nightclubs to meet people, to eventually now writing his memoir and being able to be out about it and tell his story and his background. And it goes all the way from childhood and what got him interested in singing and just fantasy elements and that sort of stuff to being an adult writing this book now, and it's really neat. For my next category, I'm going to go with self-improvement, I guess. And for that, I am going to go with So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. And the reason I've picked this book for this category is because it does such a fantastic job about talking about inherent biases and how that affects your outlook on things, and also how different minority groups, for example, the disabled community and BIPOC community, share some things in common. And while you can be sympathetic, you may not always be able to be empathetic, and vice versa, because of your experiences, and how to tell the difference in between being able to recognize that something is happening to someone and just like seeing those similarities, because the communities also often have interplay between each other, but also being able to recognize that just because your stories are similar doesn't mean they are the same and you should treat them as such. Going into language about why you should be doing your own research instead of just asking people to straight up tell you things. That stuff's already on the internet. Go look it up. There's just so much good material in this book, and I think it should be required reading in schools, honestly. My next category is history, and for that I'm going to go with The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Schroer. As a white kid growing up in the American school system, especially since for my early years I attended a private biblical-based school, my history books were not very accurate in the beginning. And honestly, I'm not sure that any of the US history books being taught in school are teaching the atrocities that the US government has done to the native peoples of the Americas. And this book does a pretty good dive into that and goes through, I think, is it the 1880s or 1890s to the present? So you should totally check that out to get those missing gaps and whatnot. For a book appropriate for all ages, I'm going to go with The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, who now goes by Kate O'Neill. I actually have a video where I covered me reading and talking about this, which I will link down in the description. But also, you should know that I filmed that before they came out as identifying as non-binary and changed their name to Kate O'Neill. So just be aware of that. That's not me trying to misgender someone. That's me calling them as they identified at the time, and that has now changed. So just be aware. I absolutely love this series, and actually there's a Kickstarter right now for the Mountain Chamomile plush, which looks so grumpy, and I need it in my life, and I cannot wait for it to get here. For the category of sci-fi, I'm going to go with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is one of the first sci-fi books I really got into. The audiobook for it is fantastic. That's the copy that I have. And it covers just so much, and I should probably make a dedicated review video to it at some point because I really need to reread it because there's a fourth book in that series now called The Wayfarers. And I need to read it, but I haven't reread the other books, so I don't want to pick up the fourth book without remembering what has been happening. So that might be content coming this way sometime soon, maybe. For sci-fi fantasy, I already touched on this. The Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Check it out if you're looking for something up that road. And for fantasy, already talked about this. Robin Hobb, the Farseer trilogy. You need to read it. It's fantastic. Question number 10. A book that reminds you of a very specific time in your life. And for that, I'm going to go with Dollar's Book of Greek Myths, because this is the first book I ever annotated or highlighted in. It's what I had in 7th grade as I was learning what annotations are, how they help you remember stuff, how to read a book for a test that isn't just regurgitating a book report. Learning just in general how to take notes when you're reading, when you find something you're really interested in. That all happened with this book, and I'm still really glad that I have it in my collection, especially since I'm trying to grow my mythology collection, so we'll get there eventually. But this book very much takes me back to 7th grade. And lastly, it's time to tag some people. So, who am I gonna go with? One, anyone who sees this video and wants to, because I like seeing all that stuff, and please do let me know when you do it, because I want to see it. But if we're gonna get into specifics, let me see if I can name some people. I'm gonna go with Lois from Lo-Chan Reads, because manga and anime and just all sorts of stuff on her lovely channel, and I'd love to see her take on this tag. I'm gonna go with Kaz from Cats and Camera, because there's always a word from the sponsors, and the sponsors are the kitties. I already mentioned kitties in this tag, so there you go. Next, I'm gonna go with Sonali from The Melodramatic Bookworm. I've been really enjoying her videos lately. I've been getting all sorts of suggestions to add to my TBR, and if you're looking to hear some Indian booktubers, she's one of them, so go check her channel out. Next, I'm gonna go with Sasha from The Wild Sasha, because hello wolves, I want to see your take on this, please, my dear. I really enjoy watching her channel sometimes too. And there you go. And lastly, I'm going to tag, well, okay, on I really suck at people's names, so I'm gonna go with her description on her Booktube channel, which is Opal from Opalescent. Her handle is at KJ Creed, but I'm gonna say Opal from Opalescent because she has that chaotic neutral energy that I just love and need in my life, and I want to see that kind of energy brought to this book tag. So that's all I have for you today. If you've made it this far into the video, leave me a cat emoji or the word cat in the comments below and tell me anything you want to tell me in the comments. Leave me book suggestions based on the tag. Are you going to do this tag? You know, all the things. I just want to talk to people because I'm lonely. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!